The ship moved through space like a small fish swimming toward a whale. It was called the Times Unity Asterisk, and it carried the hopes of every human being alive. Inside, Director Ilara Vance stood at the observation window and watched the massive station grow larger and larger. Nexus Prime, the center of galactic civilization. A structure so big that it made Earth's moon look like a pebble. Millions of beings from hundreds of species lived there. They traded, they talked, they made decisions that shaped the lives of trillions across thousands of star systems. And today, humanity would ask to join them. Ilara was 52 years old. Her hair had turned gray early from stress and worry. She had spent 30 years working toward this moment, first as a scientist, then as a diplomat, and finally as the director of human interstellar relations. She had learned 12 alien languages. She had studied the histories and customs of every species in the galactic concord. She knew more about alien cultures than most aliens knew about themselves. None of it would matter if the council said no. "Director, we are approaching the docking port," said Captain Torres from behind her. He was a good man. Steady. Calm. Exactly what she needed right now. "Thank you, Captain," Ilara said. She did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the station. Somewhere in that massive structure, 14 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy were waiting for her. They would decide if humanity had a future among the stars, or if humans would remain trapped around their single yellow sun forever. The docking process took 2 hours. Security checks, biological scans, weapon detections. The Concorde was very careful about who they let inside. Ilara understood. When you ruled the galaxy, you made enemies. Precautions were necessary. Finally, they let her through. The corridor to the council chamber was 3 kilometers long. Ilara walked it alone. That was the rule. No guards, no assistants, no support. Each species that came before the council had to send one representative. Just one. It was a test of courage, they said. A way to see what kind of people you truly were. Ilara thought it was just a way to make visitors feel small and afraid. The walls of the corridor were covered with images. Victories of the Concorde. Planets they had conquered. Species they had uplifted, or managed, or contained. The message was clear. We are powerful. You are not. Remember your place. Ilara remembered. She also remembered something else. She remembered being a little girl on Earth, looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone was out there. She remembered the joy when first contact happened. She remembered the hope that filled every human heart when they learned they were not alone. She also remembered the disappointment that came after. The Galactic Concorde had found humanity 60 years ago. They had watched from a distance, studied humans like scientists studying insects. They sent observers but not ambassadors. They took samples but offered nothing in return. When humans finally built ships fast enough to reach other stars, the Concorde had simply warned them to stay in their own system. You are not ready, they had said. Perhaps in 1,000 years. Perhaps never. But humanity had not listened. They had pushed outward anyway. Slowly. Carefully. They had established small colonies on nearby worlds. They had met other species, traded with them, learned from them, and finally, after decades of effort, the Concorde had agreed to hear their petition for membership. This was humanity's chance. Their only chance. The council chamber was round. 14 platforms floated in a circle around a central stage. Each platform held one council member. Each council member represented a species that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Ilara walked to the center stage. She was tiny compared to most of them. The Kethra representative was a massive insect, 3 meters tall with gleaming black armor. The Velthari was a being of pure light, shifting and flowing like a living sun. The Dramath was a reptile with scales of deep purple and eyes that seemed to look through her rather than at her. There were others. The fungal mycelians, who communicated through chemical signals. The crystalline architects, who had built Nexus Prime itself. The ancient archivists, who claimed to remember the birth of the first stars. All of them looked down at Ilara. All of them waited. "Speak. Human," said the Velthari. Its voice was like music and thunder combined. "Tell us why we should allow your kind to join the Concorde." Ilara had prepared this speech for 10 years. She had practiced it thousands of times. She had consulted with the greatest minds on Earth to craft every word perfectly. "Honored members of the Council," she began. "Humanity comes before you with humility and hope. We are a young species. We have much to learn. But we have also much to offer. We are creative, determined, and adaptable. We have overcome challenges that would have destroyed lesser beings. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters. We have always found a way forward. She paused and looked around the circle. We do not ask for charity. We ask for opportunity. Let us prove ourselves. Let us contribute to the great work of the Concord. Let us stand beside you as partners in building a better galaxy. Silence followed her words. The council members looked at each other. Some seemed thoughtful. Others seemed amused. One or two seemed annoyed, as if she had interrupted something more important. The Kethra spoke first. Its voice was a series of clicks and hisses that her translator turned into words. You say you are adaptable. Yet you cannot survive in vacuum. You cannot breathe underwater. You cannot tolerate temperature changes that my larvae endure without discomfort. What adaptation do you speak of? We adapt through our minds, Elara said. We build tools and machines. We create solutions to problems. We change our environment to suit our needs. So you destroy your environment, the Dramath said. We have seen what you did to your home world. Pollution, extinction of species, climate damage. You poisoned your own nest. Why would we want such beings among us? We made mistakes, Elara admitted. We learned from them. We are still learning. That is what adaptation means. We see our errors and we correct them. In 10,000 years, perhaps, the mycelian representative said. Its chemical signals created words in her translator. Your species is barely out of its infancy. You discovered fire only a heartbeat ago by our standards. You should return to your world and grow for a few more millennia before bothering us again. Elara felt her heart sinking. This was not going well. But she pressed on. We understand that we are young. But youth can be a strength. We bring fresh perspectives, new ideas, energy and enthusiasm that older species might have lost over time. The Velthari laughed. At least, Elara thought it was a laugh. The being of light pulsed and flickered in a way that suggested amusement. Fresh perspectives? Little human. We have seen 1,000,000 species rise and fall. We have witnessed the birth and death of stars. We have solved problems your kind cannot even comprehend. What could you possibly offer that we have not already considered and rejected? We offer ourselves, Elara said simply. Our loyalty, our labor, our dreams. We want to be part of something greater than ourselves. Is that not worth something? More silence. The council members communicated among themselves in ways Elara could not follow. Private channels, perhaps. Mental links. Secret languages. She stood alone on the central stage and waited for her fate to be decided. Finally, the eldest of the archivists spoke. It was a being that looked like a collection of floating geometric shapes, constantly rearranging themselves into new patterns. Its voice was dry and ancient, like wind blowing through dead leaves. We have discussed your petition. We have considered your words. We have reviewed the data collected about your species over the past 60 years. Elara held her breath. The decision of the Council is unanimous. Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Concord. The words hit Elara like a physical blow. She had prepared herself for this possibility. She had told herself she would accept whatever decision the Council made with grace and dignity. But hearing the actual words was different. It hurt in a way she had not expected. May I ask why? She said. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that, the Velthari answered. You are too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable. Your species shows promise perhaps, but also great danger. You wage war among yourselves constantly. You destroy without thinking. You consume without restraint. These are not the qualities we seek in member species. Additionally, the Kethra added, you lack psionic capability. All Concord species possess some form of mental power. Telepathy, telekinesis, precognition. Your brains are blind and deaf to the mental spectrum. You are, in a very real sense, disabled. Your biology is fragile, the Dramath continued. You require very specific conditions to survive. Temperature, atmosphere, gravity, radiation. The range of environments you can tolerate is embarrassingly narrow. You would be a burden to any fleet or station that accepted you. Your homeworld is insignificant, the mycelian said. A small planet around a small star in a region of space with no strategic value. You control no resources we need. You occupy no territory we want. You are, to be direct, worthless to us. Each word was a knife. Elara stood and accepted them all. She did not argue. She did not beg. There was no point. The decision had been made. Probably it had been made before she even entered the chamber. This hearing had been a formality, nothing more. A chance for the council to explain their contempt to her face. "Return to your single star," the Velthari said. "Be grateful that we do not classify you as a pest species to be managed. Perhaps in 10,000 years, if you survive, you may petition again. But we doubt you will survive. Species like yours rarely do." Elara looked around the chamber one last time. She saw the dismissal in their eyes, the contempt, the absolute certainty that humanity was nothing and would never be anything. She activated the recording device hidden in her clothing. It was illegal to record council proceedings without permission. She did not care. She captured every face, every gesture, every whispered comment her translators picked up. The Kethra called humans meat that thinks. The Dramath compared them to a disease that needed to be quarantined. The archivist simply ignored her. Already moving on to more important matters, Elara memorized it all. Then she turned and walked back down the 3-kilometer corridor. She did not rush. She did not cry. She kept her head high and her back straight the entire way. Captain Torres was waiting at the ship. He took one look at her face and knew. "I'm sorry, Director," he said quietly. "Don't be," Elara replied. "They showed us exactly what we are to them. That knowledge is valuable." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Elara spent most of that time alone in her cabin, thinking. By the time the Times Unity Times entered the solar system, she had made her decision. The United Terran Assembly met in Geneva. Representatives from every nation on Earth filled the Great Hall. Billions more watched through screens and broadcasts. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Everyone wanted to know what came next. Elara stood at the podium and told them the truth. She played the recording of the council session. She let them hear every insult, every dismissal, every expression of contempt. When it was finished, the hall was silent. Some people wept. Some people shouted in anger. Most simply sat in stunned disbelief. Then Elara spoke. "They see us as nothing, less than nothing. Pests, vermin, a mistake of evolution that will correct itself in time. They believe we will destroy ourselves. They believe we will fail. They believe we will crawl back to our small planet and die in obscurity, while they rule the stars forever." She paused and looked out at the assembled representatives. "They are wrong." Her voice grew stronger. "They are wrong because they do not understand what we are. They measure worth in years and power in psionic ability. They count our weaknesses and ignore our strengths. They see our fragility and miss our resilience. They see our youth and forget that every ancient species was young once." She pointed to the star map displayed behind her. "The conquered controls the core of the galaxy. The rich systems, the developed worlds, the ancient territories. They have everything they want. They have no reason to look beyond their borders. And beyond their borders lies the outer rim." The map shifted to show a vast region of unexplored space. Dark, unknown, ignored. The outer rim is considered worthless. Too far from the core, too dangerous, too empty. No Concord species has bothered to explore it in thousands of years. They believe there is nothing there worth having. Elara smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "They gave us nothing. They told us we deserve nothing. So we will take everything they left behind. We will go to the outer rim. We will explore it, settle it, develop it. We will build something new. Something entirely our own. Not in their systems. Not by their rules. Not with their permission." She looked directly into the cameras, speaking now to all of humanity. "They cast us aside. They told us we have no place among the stars. Very well. We will make our own place. We will prove them wrong. And one day, when they finally look up from their comfortable thrones and see what we have become, they will understand their mistake." The hall erupted. Some cheered. Some protested. Some demanded war, revenge, immediate action. Others counseled patience, acceptance, waiting for a better time. But Elara had planted the seed. And seeds, once planted, have a way of growing. Over the next 10 years, the Terran Expansion Initiative took shape. Scientists designed new ships capable of traveling farther and faster than anything humanity had built before. Engineers developed technologies for surviving in unknown environments. Billions of people volunteered to leave everything they knew behind and venture into the darkness. Not everyone agreed with the plan. Some thought it was too risky. Some thought it was too expensive. Some thought humanity should simply accept its place and make the best of life in the solar system. But enough people believed. Enough people remembered the Council's contempt and burned with the desire to prove them wrong. Enough people looked at the stars and refused to accept that they were forbidden. Elara Vance watched the first colony ships launch from orbit. She was 62 years old now. She knew she would not live to see what humanity would become. But she had given them direction. She had given them purpose. She had turned rejection into motivation, humiliation into fuel. Her assistant stood beside her, watching the ships disappear into the void. "Do you really think we can do this?" he asked. "Build something out there that will make the Council regret their decision?" Elara did not answer immediately. She thought about the Velthari's laughter, the Kethra's contempt, the Archivist's indifference. She thought about all the species that had looked at humanity and seen nothing worth noticing. "I think," she said slowly, "that they have never met anything like us before. They have conquered and absorbed and managed other species for thousands of years. They know how to handle civilizations that fight back or surrender. But they do not know how to handle a species that simply refuses to accept the verdict." She turned away from the window. "We are going into the darkness. We have no map, no guide, no guarantee of success. We might fail, we might die, we might prove them right after all." She smiled again, that same cold smile she had worn in the Council chamber. "But I don't think we will. Because humans do not know how to quit. We do not know how to accept defeat. We do not know how to stay where we are put. Those traits they called weaknesses, aggression, unpredictability, stubbornness, those are our greatest strengths. And one day, the Council will learn that lesson." The colony ships were gone now, swallowed by the infinite dark. But they were not alone. Hundreds more would follow in the years to come. Thousands, millions of people spreading outward into the unknown, carrying with them the dreams and determination of a species that had been told it was worthless. The outer rim was waiting, and humanity was coming. 50 years had passed since the day Elara Vance stood before the Council and was told humanity was worthless. 50 years of building, launching, hoping, and praying. 50 years of ships disappearing into the darkness and messages coming back, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes not at all. Elara was dead now. She had passed away in her sleep at the age of 89, surrounded by family and friends. Her last words had been a question. "Have we found anything yet?" So, the answer, at that moment, had been no. Not really. The early expeditions had found plenty of empty worlds. Rocks and ice and dead planets where nothing lived and nothing grew. Some colonists had settled on these worlds anyway, determined to make something from nothing. Others had pushed deeper into the unknown, searching for something better. But now, finally, they had found it. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Times Endeavor Times and stared at the planet below. It was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling across the surface. It looked almost like Earth, but bigger, healthier, younger. No pollution darkened its skies. No cities scarred its surface. It was untouched and waiting. "Life signs?" Marcus asked his science officer. Lieutenant Sarah Park checked her instruments. Abundant plant life, animal life in the oceans and on land. No signs of intelligent inhabitants. No artificial structures. No electromagnetic signals. If anyone ever lived here, they left a very long time ago. Marcus nodded slowly. This was the 7th star system they had surveyed in the past year. The previous 6 had been disappointing. Dead worlds, gas giants, asteroid fields with nothing useful. But this one was different. This one was perfect. "Send word back to the fleet," he ordered. "Tell them we found it. Kepler, 442b. Habitable. Unclaimed. Ours." The message took weeks to reach Earth. By the time it arrived, Marcus and his crew had already landed and begun their initial survey. What they found changed everything. The planet was not empty after all. Not completely. The ruins were ancient, thousands of years old, maybe millions. Crumbling structures made of materials Marcus did not recognize. Strange symbols carved into walls that had stood longer than human civilization had existed. Machines that no longer worked. Their purpose unknown. Someone had been here before. Someone had built cities and roads and monuments. And then they had vanished, leaving nothing behind, but silence and stone. Who were they? Sarah asked as they walked through the ruins. Where did they go? Marcus shook his head. I don't know. But look at this architecture. Look at these designs. Whoever they were advanced. Much more advanced than us. More advanced than the Concorde. That question hung in the air. Marcus thought about it carefully before answering. Maybe. The Concorde has never mentioned anything like this. They talk about themselves as the first great civilizations, the oldest powers in the galaxy. But these ruins are older than anything they have shown us. Much older. They explored deeper into the ruined city. Most of what they found was broken or decayed beyond understanding. But in one building, buried beneath layers of dirt and debris, they discovered something intact. It was a door. A massive door made of metal that gleamed as if it had been polished yesterday. No rust, no damage, no signs of age. It looked like it had been built last week. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. Nothing stays preserved this long. Not without active maintenance. Marcus approached the door carefully. His instruments detected strange energy readings coming from behind it. Something was still working in there. Something was still powered after all this time. Should we try to open it? Sarah asked. Marcus thought about the risks. They had no idea what was behind that door. It could be dangerous. It could be nothing. It could be the greatest discovery in human history. He made his decision. Yes, open it. It took them 3 days to figure out how. The door had no handle, no visible mechanism, no obvious way to interact with it. Eventually, one of the engineers discovered that it responded to specific sound frequencies. A certain pattern of tones, played in the right order, caused the door to slide open with a soft hiss. Behind it was a chamber filled with light. Marcus had expected dust and darkness. Instead, he found a room that seemed alive with energy. Columns of soft blue light rose from floor to ceiling, walls covered with symbols that pulsed and shifted as he watched. And in the center of the room, floating in mid-air, was a sphere about the size of a human head. The sphere was made of crystal, or something that looked like crystal. Inside it, patterns of light moved and danced in complex formations. It was beautiful, hypnotic, almost alive. What is it? Sarah breathed. Marcus reached out toward the sphere. As his hand approached, the patterns inside it changed. They formed shapes that looked almost like words, though in no language he recognized. Then, suddenly, the sphere spoke, not in sound, in thought. Information flooded Marcus's mind. Concepts, images, memories that were not his own. He saw stars being born and dying. He saw civilizations rising from primitive beginnings to cosmic power. He saw wars fought across galaxies, peace treaties signed between species that no longer existed, technologies that bent the laws of physics, and he saw the ones who had built this place. They called themselves the precursors. Or at least, that was the closest translation his mind could manage. They had ruled the galaxy long before the Concorde existed, long before any of the current species had evolved. They had built wonders that made Nexus Prime look like a child's toy. They had understood secrets of the universe that modern science had not even begun to approach. And then they had left. Not died. Not been destroyed. Simply left. Moved on to somewhere else. Some higher plane of existence or some other galaxy or some state of being that Marcus could not comprehend. But they had left things behind. Gifts for whoever came after. Knowledge stored in crystal spheres. Machines waiting to be activated. Maps to resources and treasures scattered across the outer rim. Marcus pulled his hand back from the sphere. He was shaking. Tears streamed down his face, though he did not know why. "Captain?" Sarah's voice seemed very far away. "Are you all right? What happened?" Marcus looked at her. Then he looked at the sphere. Then he started to laugh. "We need to send another message to Earth," he said. "Tell them we found something much better than a habitable planet. Tell them we found hope." The news spread across human space like wildfire. The precursor vault on Kepler 442b was just the first of many. As more expedition teams pushed into the outer rim, they found more ruins, more vaults, more gifts left behind by a civilization that had transcended millions of years ago. On a frozen moon orbiting a gas giant, miners discovered caverns filled with crystal data cores. Each core contained star maps, showing resource-rich systems that the Concorde had never charted. Metal deposits, rare elements, energy sources beyond anything known to current science. On an airless rock at the edge of a dying star system, scientists found a manufacturing facility that still worked. Feed it raw materials, and it produced components made of materials that should not exist. Alloys stronger than anything human or Concorde engineers could create. Conductors that moved energy with perfect efficiency. Metamaterials that bent light and gravity in impossible ways. On a world shrouded in perpetual storms, explorers discovered a library. Not books or screens or databases, but direct mental downloads. Centuries of accumulated knowledge poured into human minds in moments. Mathematics that solved problems Earth's greatest geniuses had struggled with for generations. Physics that explained phenomena the Concorde still called unexplainable. Biology that opened doors to medicines and modifications beyond imagination. Each discovery led to more discoveries. Each vault contained hints pointing to other vaults. The precursors had scattered their gifts across the outer rim like seeds, waiting for someone curious enough and desperate enough to find them. The Concorde had never looked. Why would they? They were already powerful. They were already ancient. They had everything they wanted. The thought of searching the empty darkness beyond their borders for treasures left by someone else had never occurred to them. But humanity had nothing. Humanity was desperate. And desperate people searched places that comfortable people ignored. Admiral Yuki Tanaka was one of the first to understand what this meant. She was 60 years old, a veteran of the early expedition fleets. She had spent most of her life in space, jumping from system to system, searching for a place where humanity could build a future. She had seen dozens of colonies rise, a few colonies fall, and countless acts of courage and sacrifice along the way. Now she stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Times Horizon Asterisk, and looked out at Bastion Station. 10 years ago, this had been empty space. Now it was the heart of human civilization in the outer rim, a massive habitat orbiting a captured gas giant, home to 3 million people and growing every month. Shipyards stretched out from its core, building vessels faster than humans had ever built them before. Research facilities hummed with activity as scientists worked to understand and replicate precursor technologies. "Admiral," her aide said, "the latest population report from Earth. They're sending another wave. 20 million colonists over the next 5 years." Yuki nodded. The exodus continued. It had started as a trickle after Alara Vance's speech. Then it had become a stream. Now it was a flood. People from every nation, every background, every walk of life, were volunteering to leave everything behind and start over in the outer rim. Some came for adventure. Some came for opportunity. Some came because they had nothing left to lose. But all of them came because they believed in the dream Alara had planted 50 years ago. The dream of proving the Council wrong. "Send them," Yuki said. "We have room. We have resources. We have work for everyone." She turned to look at the star map displayed on the bridge. Human territory was marked in blue. It had started as a single dot around Earth. Now it was a spreading stain across the outer rim, covering hundreds of star systems. Not all of those systems were developed. Most were still being surveyed or had small outposts. But the foundation was there. The infrastructure was growing. Every year, humanity became stronger, more established, more permanent. And the Concorde still had not noticed. That surprised Yuki more than anything else. She had expected the ancient powers to react to humanity's expansion, to send observers, diplomats, maybe even threats. But there had been nothing. Complete silence from Nexus Prime. She had discussed this with the other admirals, the colony governors, the scientists. They had theories. The Concorde was too arrogant to care what happened in the worthless outer rim. The Concorde was too slow and bureaucratic to notice changes on the frontier. The Concorde simply did not believe that humanity could build anything significant, so they did not bother to check. Whatever the reason, their blindness was a gift. Every year of peace was a year to grow stronger. Every year without interference was a year to establish deeper roots. The longer the Concorde ignored them, the harder it would be to uproot them later. "We need to be ready," Yuki said to no one in particular. "They will come eventually. When they realize what we have built, they will not be happy." Her aide looked nervous. "Do you think they will attack?" Yuki considered the question carefully. "I think they will do what powerful beings always do when they feel threatened. They will try to control us, to limit us, to put us back in our place. Whether that means war or something else, I cannot say. But we must be ready for anything. She issued orders. The shipyards increased production. The research facilities prioritized military applications. Defense stations were constructed around key systems. A formal military structure was established, with training programs, command hierarchies, and contingency plans. They called it the Outer Guard. Its purpose was simple: protect humanity's new home from anyone who tried to take it away. Years passed. The Outer Guard grew from a small defense force to a serious military power. Human scientists cracked more precursor secrets, adapting ancient technologies to modern needs. Ships became faster, stronger, more capable. Weapons became more powerful. Shields became harder to penetrate. Yuki watched it all happen and felt a strange mixture of pride and fear. Pride in what humanity had accomplished. Fear of what might be coming. She was 75 years old when the first Concorde scout ships appeared at the edge of human territory. They were small vessels, designed for observation rather than combat. They jumped in, scanned the area, and jumped out before anyone could intercept them. Classic reconnaissance tactics. Yuki knew what this meant. The Concorde had finally noticed. They were gathering information, assessing the situation, preparing their response. She called an emergency meeting of the Terran Outer Rim Confederation, the governing body that had formed to coordinate human activities across the rim. Representatives from every major colony attended, either in person or via long-range communication. They are watching us now, Yuki told them. We have perhaps a few years, maybe less, before they decide what to do. We must use that time wisely. The debates that followed were intense. Some wanted to reach out, to try diplomacy, to show the Concorde that humanity wanted peace. Others wanted to strike first, to hit the scout ships and show strength. Still others wanted to hide, to pull back to the most defensible systems and hope the Concorde would lose interest. In the end, they chose a middle path. They would continue building, continue preparing, continue growing stronger. They would not provoke the Concorde, but they would not show weakness either. If the ancient powers wanted peace, humanity would welcome it. If they wanted war, humanity would be ready. Yuki returned to Bastion Station and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Concorde was making plans. Somewhere out there, the old powers were discussing what to do about the upstart species that had crawled out of the darkness and built something in their backyard. She thought about Alara Vance, the woman who had started all of this with a speech and a dream. Alara had died without knowing if humanity would succeed. She had planted a seed and trusted others to help it grow. We're still growing, Alara, Yuki whispered to the stars. We're still proving them wrong. I hope you can see it, wherever you are. In her hand, she held a small crystal sphere, a gift from the precursors, recovered from the first vault on Kepler 442b. It was a symbol now, passed from leader to leader, a reminder of where humanity had come from and where they were going. The sphere pulsed softly in her palm. Yuki liked to imagine it was the precursors approving of what humanity had done. Probably it was just random energy fluctuations, but sometimes, imagination was more important than facts. The outer rim was no longer empty. It was no longer worthless. It was home to 100 million human beings and growing. It was filled with cities and farms and factories and schools. It was alive with dreams and hopes and determination. The Concorde had thrown humanity away. They had called them worthless, insignificant, doomed to fail. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. 120 years had passed since humanity was cast aside by the Galactic Council. 120 years since Alara Vance had pointed to the darkness beyond the Concorde's borders and said, "We will take everything they left behind." She would have been amazed by what her people had built. The Terran Outer Rim Confederation now stretched across 400 star systems. Some were fully developed worlds with cities and industries and populations in the billions. Others were frontier outposts, mining operations, research stations. Together, they formed a web of human civilization that spanned distances the early explorers could barely have imagined. Bastion Station, once a simple habitat in orbit around a gas giant, had grown into something magnificent. It was now a city habitat larger than most moons, home to 50 million people. Ships came and went constantly, carrying goods, passengers, and information to every corner of human space. It was the heart of the Confederation, the symbol of everything humanity had achieved. Chancellor Amara Okonkwo stood at the great window in her office, watching the endless stream of traffic. She was 63 years old, tall and strong, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen both the best and worst of what humanity could do. She had been chancellor for 8 years now, elected by the Confederate Assembly to lead their young civilization through whatever challenges lay ahead. Those challenges were about to become very real. "Chancellor," said her aide, stepping into the office. "The council meeting is about to begin. They're waiting for you." Amara nodded and turned away from the window. The Confederate Assembly was gathered in the great hall below, along with military commanders, scientists, and representatives from every major colony. They had come to discuss the most important question facing humanity: what to do about the Concorde. The scout ships had stopped appearing 2 years ago. At first, the military had hoped this meant the Concorde had lost interest, but intelligence reports told a different story. The ancient powers were not losing interest. They were gathering their forces. They were preparing something big. Amara walked into the great hall and took her place at the central podium. The room fell silent as she looked out at the assembled crowd. Thousands of faces looked back at her. Some worried, some determined, some afraid. They all wanted to know what she was going to say. They all wanted to know if they were safe. "Friends," Amara began, "we are here to discuss our future. Not just the next year, or the next decade, but the future of humanity itself. What I have to tell you is difficult, but you deserve to know the truth." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared behind her. It showed the latest intelligence data, gathered by stealth probes and intercepted communications. The Concorde has assembled a fleet at the edge of their territory. 800 warships, 30 million soldiers, weapons and technologies that we are still working to understand. This is the largest military force they have gathered in over 1,000 years. Murmurs spread through the crowd. 800 warships. The Confederation's entire fleet numbered less than 300. And many of those were converted cargo ships or hastily built patrol vessels. "We do not know exactly when they will move," Amara continued, "but we know where they are going. Here, to the outer rim. To us." She paused to let that sink in. "Some of you are wondering why. We have done nothing to threaten the Concorde. We have stayed in our own territory. We have not challenged their authority or interfered with their operations. Why would they come for us?" Amara looked around the room slowly. "Because we exist. Because we have built something without their permission. Because we have grown stronger than they expected. Because we have proven their judgment wrong. And powerful beings do not like being wrong." She pulled up another image. A recording of the council session from 120 years ago. Elara Vance, standing alone before the 14 ancient powers. The Velthari laughing. The Kethra calling humans meat that thinks. The archivist turning away in disinterest. They told us we were worthless. They told us to crawl back to our small planet and wait to die. But we did not crawl. We did not die. We spread across the stars they had abandoned. We found treasures they were too arrogant to seek. We built a civilization from nothing. Her voice grew stronger. And now they are afraid. Not of our weapons, though our weapons have grown strong. Not of our numbers, though our population has grown large. They are afraid of what we represent. The possibility that they were wrong. The possibility that their judgment is not perfect. The possibility that other species might follow our example and challenge their authority. She turned off the display and faced the crowd directly. They are coming to crush us. To destroy everything we have built. To prove to themselves and to the galaxy that their original verdict was correct. That humanity really is worthless. That we really should have crawled back to Earth and died. Silence filled the hall. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Fleet Admiral Dmitry Volkov stood up from his seat in the front row. He was 70 years old. Born on a colony ship during the Great Exodus, his entire life had been shaped by humanity's struggle to survive in the Outer Rim. He had risen through the military ranks on talent and determination, becoming the commander of the Outer Guard 15 years ago. "Chancellor," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "What are your orders?" Amara smiled slightly. She had known Dmitry for 20 years. He was not a complicated man. He saw problems and he wanted to solve them. If the Concorde was coming, he wanted to fight. That was his nature. "Admiral Volkov," she said, "the floor is yours. Tell us what we face." Dmitry walked to the podium and activated his own displays. Technical data, ship specifications, tactical analyses. He went through them methodically, explaining the Concorde's strengths and weaknesses, their likely strategies, their probable targets. Their fleet is larger than ours, he admitted. Their individual ships are, in most cases, more powerful than ours. Their crews have more experience, more training, more resources. On paper, they should destroy us easily. He paused and let the silence stretch. But we have advantages they do not expect. First, we have precursor technology. Our ships may be smaller, but our weapons are now at least equal to theirs, and in some cases, superior. Our shields use principles they do not understand. Our engines can do things their engineers believe are impossible. He pulled up more data. Second, we know this territory. The Outer Rim is our home. We know every system, every asteroid field, every navigational hazard. They will be fighting in unfamiliar space while we fight in our own backyard. Third, and most important, we have something they lost long ago. Desperation, hunger, the will to survive at any cost. They are coming here expecting a quick victory over inferior beings. They expect us to break and run. They expect us to surrender when we see their power. His eyes swept across the crowd. We will not break. We will not run. We will not surrender. We will show them what happens when you underestimate humanity. The crowd erupted in cheers. Dmitri let them express their feelings for a moment before raising his hand for silence. But we must be realistic. Courage alone will not win this war. We need every ship, every weapon, every able body we can muster. We need civilians willing to support the war effort, to work in factories and shipyards, to maintain supply lines and provide resources. We need scientists to continue unlocking precursor secrets. We need everyone to do their part. He looked at Amara. Chancellor, I believe we can win this war, but it will be the hardest thing humanity has ever done. We will lose ships. We will lose people. We will lose colonies. Before this is over, some of the faces in this room will be gone forever. That is the price of survival. Amara nodded slowly. She had known this was coming. She had hoped it would not, but she had known. Admiral Volkov speaks the truth, she said. This will be difficult. Perhaps the most difficult thing our species has ever faced. But we have faced difficult things before. Ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. We have survived everything the universe has thrown at us for hundreds of thousands of years. We will survive this too. She raised her voice so that everyone could hear. I am not going to promise you victory. No one can promise that. But I will promise you this. We will fight. We will resist. We will make them pay for every system they try to take, every station they try to destroy, every life they try to end. And whether we win or lose, history will remember that when the ancient powers came to crush us, humanity did not bow. Humanity stood tall. Humanity fought back. The vote that followed was unanimous. The Confederation would resist. The Outer Guard would defend their territory. Every resource would be devoted to the war effort. As the meeting ended and people began to file out, Amara found herself standing alone with Dmitri. Do you really believe we can win? She asked quietly. Dmitri was silent for a long moment. I believe we have a chance, he finally said. A small chance, perhaps, but better than the chance the Council gave us when they threw us out. Better than the chance we had when we first came to the Outer Rim with nothing but old ships and desperate hopes. He looked at her with those hard, determined eyes. And honestly, Chancellor, it doesn't matter if I believe. The Concorde is coming whether we believe or not. We can either fight, or we can die on our knees. I would rather die fighting. Amara nodded. So would I. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity. Shipyards worked around the clock. Factories produced weapons and supplies at maximum capacity. Civilian volunteers trained for military duty. Scientists pushed their research to the limits, trying to unlock any advantage that might help in the coming battle. And in secret, the Prometheus project moved forward. Amara knew about it, of course. As Chancellor, she had access to all classified information. The Prometheus project was the most classified of all. It was humanity's last resort, their final card, the weapon they hoped they would never have to use. Precursor technology had given humanity many gifts. Better engines, stronger shields, more powerful weapons. But one discovery had been kept hidden from everyone except a handful of scientists and military commanders. A method of generating localized space-time distortions, miniature black holes. controlled and directed, capable of crushing anything within their range. The physics involved were terrifying. The potential for disaster was enormous. A single mistake could destroy not just a ship but an entire star system. But if used correctly, it could turn the tide of any battle. One destroyer had been modified to carry a Prometheus core. Its name was the Times Defiance Asterisk. Its crew knew they might be asked to make the ultimate sacrifice. They had volunteered anyway. Amara hoped she would never have to give that order. She hoped the regular fleet could win the battle on its own. She hoped the Concorde would see humanity's strength and decide negotiation was better than war. But she was prepared to use every weapon at her disposal if that was what survival required. The fleet gathered at Threshold, a system at the edge of Confederation space. It was the most likely point of attack. Based on the intelligence they had gathered, if the Concorde wanted to strike at humanity's heart, they would have to come through here. 300 human ships waited. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, battleships. Many were new, built in the rush of preparation over the past months. Others were veterans, ships that had served the Confederation for decades. All of them were ready to fight. Admiral Volkov stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Times Indomitable Asterisk. Around him, officers and crew worked with quiet efficiency, making final preparations. Sensor teams watched for any sign of the enemy. Weapons teams ran diagnostics on every gun and missile. Engine teams ensured they could move and maneuver at a moment's notice. "How long do you think we have?" asked Captain Liu, Volkov's second in command. Volkov checked the latest reports. Hours, maybe less. Their advanced scouts were spotted 2 systems away this morning. The main fleet won't be far behind. Liu nodded. She was younger than Volkov, in her 40s, with a sharp mind and steady nerves. She had earned her position through years of service and proved herself in a dozen skirmishes with pirates and raiders. "The crews are ready," she said. "Morale is high. Whatever happens, we'll give them a fight they won't forget." Volkov allowed himself a small smile. "That's all I ask. Make them remember us. Make them respect us. Even if we lose, make sure they know they were in a war, not a slaughter." The waiting continued. Hours passed. Tension built like pressure in a sealed container. Every minute felt like an eternity. Then the alarms began to sound. "Contact!" shouted the sensor officer. Multiple signatures coming out of jump space. Bearing 047 Mark III. Range 70,000 kilometers and closing. The main display lit up with enemy icons. Red dots appearing one after another, filling the screen like drops of blood spreading through water. 100 ships. 200. 300. 400. 500. The counting continued until the number reached 812. The entire Concorde expeditionary fleet, arrayed against them in perfect formation. Volkov studied the enemy formation calmly. He had expected this. He had prepared for this. Fear was a luxury he could not afford. "All ships, battle stations," he ordered. "Form defensive pattern Sigma 7. Hold position until my command." The human fleet responded instantly. Ships moving into a tight defensive formation. They were outnumbered almost 3-1. They would not win a straight fight. They would have to be smarter than that. On the bridge of the Times Eternal Radiance Asterisk, Grand Admiral Zeth Voran of the Velthari surveyed the human fleet with contempt. Such small ships, such primitive formations. This would be over quickly. "Interesting," he said to his aide. "They have more vessels than our reports indicated. They have been busy." "Yes, Grand Admiral. But their technology is still inferior. Their crews lack experience. This will not be a challenge." Zeth Voran was a being of pure light, ancient even by Velthari standards. He had commanded fleets before humanity's ancestors had discovered fire. He had conquered species that history had forgotten. He expected this to be another simple victory in a long career of simple victories. "Still," he said thoughtfully, "I am curious. They were told to stay in their single system. They were told they had no place among the stars. Yet here they are, defying us. It takes a certain kind of arrogance to challenge the Council, or stupidity," his aide suggested. "Perhaps, we shall see." He gave the order to advance. Across the void, 2 forces moved toward each other. 800 against 300. Ancient power against young defiance. The fate of humanity would be decided in the hours to come. Admiral Volkov watched the enemy approach and felt something he had not expected. Not fear. Not despair. Anticipation. All ships, he said, his voice calm and clear. This is Admiral Volkov. You know why we're here. You know what we're fighting for. Our homes, our families, our right to exist. The Concorde thinks we're nothing. They think we'll break and run at the first shot. They think this will be easy. He paused. Let's prove them wrong. The first shots were fired at exactly 14:37 Confederation Standard Time. History would remember that moment forever. Grand Admiral Zeth Voran had ordered his fleet to advance in a broad formation, expecting the humans to either retreat or be overwhelmed quickly. His ships moved with the confidence of predators approaching prey, energy weapons charged, shields powered up. 800 vessels spread across the void like a net closing around a small fish. Admiral Volkov watched them come. He had studied the Concorde's tactics. He knew their patterns, their preferences, their weaknesses. They liked to overwhelm enemies with superior numbers. They liked to crush resistance quickly and move on. They were not used to prey that fought back. All ships, execute maneuver Alpha 3, he ordered. Let them think we're retreating. The human fleet began to fall back, moving toward the asteroid field behind them. The Concorde fleet accelerated to pursue. Just as Volkov had predicted, they're taking the bait, Captain Liu observed. Their formation is spreading as they try to cut off our retreat. Volkov nodded. The Concorde had thousands of years of victory behind them. They had never learned to be cautious. They had never needed to. Wait for it, he said. Wait until they're fully committed. The Concorde ships pushed into the asteroid field, following the retreating humans. Their sensors were good, but the dense rock formations scattered their readings, made it harder to track individual ships, exactly as planned. Now, Volkov said, execute Omega Protocol. All ships, attack. The human fleet stopped retreating and turned to fight. But they did not attack head-on. Instead, they scattered, breaking into small groups of 3 or 4 ships each. Each group targeted a different section of the enemy formation. On the Time's Eternal Radiance asterisk, Zeth Voran watched the human ships disappear from his tactical display as they dove into the asteroid field. What are they doing? He demanded. They can't hide from us. Find them. His sensor operators worked frantically, trying to track the fast-moving human vessels. But the asteroids provided cover, and the humans were using every advantage they could find. The first attack came from nowhere. Commodore Jin Reyes commanded the Times Constellation Times battle group, 4 ships working together in perfect coordination. They emerged from behind a massive asteroid and opened fire on a Velthari cruiser before it could react. But their weapons did not have the expected effect. The Velthari shields absorbed the energy blasts, glowing brightly but remaining intact. Switch to kinetic, Reyes ordered immediately. Alpha pattern. The Concorde had developed their shields over thousands of years. They were perfectly designed to absorb and dissipate energy weapons, but they were not designed for what came next. The human ships launched projectiles, simple tungsten rods, accelerated to a fraction of light speed by magnetic rails. No fancy energy, no complex technology, just mass and velocity, the oldest weapon in the universe. The rods hit the Velthari cruiser like hammers hitting glass. The shields, designed for energy dissipation, could not handle the pure kinetic force. They collapsed. The rods punched through the hull, tearing the ship apart from within. The Velthari cruiser exploded. Across the battle, similar scenes played out. Human ships emerged from cover, struck with kinetic weapons, and disappeared again before the Concorde could respond. The ancient warships, designed for a type of warfare that had not changed in millennia, were unprepared for enemies who fought differently. Zeth Voran watched in disbelief as his fleet began to take losses. Impossible, he whispered. Their weapons should not be able to penetrate our shields. They're using kinetic impacts. Grand Admiral, his tactical officer reported. Our shields are calibrated for energy absorption. The physical projectiles are bypassing our defenses. Then recalibrate, Zeth Voran shouted. Adjust the shield frequencies. It takes time, Grand Admiral. Our systems are not designed for rapid changes. The protocols require... I don't care about protocols. We are losing ships. It was true. In the first hour of battle, the Concorde lost 23 vessels. The humans lost only 5. The exchange rate was absurdly lopsided, impossible by any historical standard. But the Concorde had numbers. They could afford losses that would cripple the human fleet. Gethvaran knew this. He just had to be patient and let mathematics do its work. All ships, form defensive clusters, he ordered. Concentrate fire on any human vessel that reveals itself. They cannot hide forever. The battle shifted. The Concorde stopped advancing and pulled into tight defensive formations. Human hit-and-run attacks became more dangerous as the enemy learned to watch for them. The exchange rate began to balance. Admiral Volkov saw this happening and adjusted his strategy. Deploy the architects, he ordered. The architect drones were one of humanity's secret weapons. Artificial intelligences far beyond anything the Confederation had built before the precursor discoveries. They were not just weapons, they were learning systems, capable of analyzing enemy patterns and adapting in real time. Thousands of small drones launched from human carriers. Each one was intelligent, coordinated with its fellows, and absolutely relentless. The Kethra swarm had brought fighter craft to the battle. Millions of small ships crewed by insectoid pilots, swarming around the larger vessels like angry bees. They were fast, maneuverable, and deadly in large numbers. The architects met them in the void. At first, the Kethra had the advantage. They had been fighting as swarms for millions of years. Their coordination was instinctive, bred into their very genes. They overwhelmed the architects through sheer numbers. But the architects learned. Every engagement taught them something new. Every destroyed drone sent data back to its fellows. Within minutes, the architects began predicting Kethra attack patterns. Within an hour, they were anticipating movements before they happened. Kethra fighters began dying in waves. They would swoop in for an attack, and the architects would already be there, waiting, firing before the Kethra even knew they were targeted. The swarm leader screamed in frustration through his command channel. They are learning too fast. Our patterns are useless. Every attack fails. Change your patterns. Gethvaran ordered. We are trying, but they adapt faster than we can change. It is like fighting an enemy that knows our thoughts. On the bridge of the Time's indomitable asterisk, Volkov allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The architects were performing beyond expectations. The battle was not won, but it was no longer the certain defeat everyone had predicted. Admiral, Captain Liu said urgently. New contact. A large ship is emerging from the Concorde formation. Very large. Volkov looked at the display. A massive vessel, easily 10 times the size of his flagship, was moving toward the human lines. Its shape was unfamiliar, covered with strange protrusions and glowing nodes. What is that? Unknown, sir. We have no records of anything like it. Sensors show enormous power readings. Whatever it is, it's not a normal warship. The massive ship stopped at the edge of the asteroid field. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the glowing nodes began to pulse with increasing intensity. Energy spike, Liu shouted. Something is. The ship fired. A beam of pure white light lanced across the void. It struck an asteroid the size of a small moon and vaporized it instantly. Then it swept sideways, cutting through 3 human cruisers that were hidden behind the asteroid. They did not explode. They simply ceased to exist, converted to expanding clouds of superheated gas. Volkov stared in horror. In a single shot, the enemy had killed more humans than the rest of the battle combined. All ships, disperse, he ordered. Get away from that weapon's firing arc. Move. The human fleet scattered. The massive ship fired again, and again, each beam annihilating anything it touched. Asteroids, ships, defense platforms. Nothing could withstand its power. What do we do? Liu asked, her voice shaking for the first time. Our weapons can't touch something that size. It will destroy us all. Volkov's mind raced through options. Conventional attacks were useless. The ship's shields would be proportionally stronger than anything they had faced. Even kinetic weapons would not work against something that massive. There was only one choice. Signal the Time's defiance asterisk, he said quietly. Tell them it's time. Liu's face went pale. She knew what that meant. Everyone in the command structure knew what that meant. Sir, are you sure? We have no choice. If we don't stop that ship, everyone dies. The Time's Defiance Times is our only option. The Time's Defiance Times was a destroyer, small and fast. It had been modified in secret to carry the Prometheus core. Only 50 crew members, all volunteers, all knowing that they might not survive their mission. Captain Sarah Park commanded the Time's Defiance asterisk. She was the same Sarah Park who had served with Marcus Chen on the Times Endeavour Times so many years ago, when humanity first discovered the precursor vaults. She was older now, gray-haired and worn, but still sharp and determined. When the signal came, she did not hesitate. "All hands," she announced over the ship's intercom. "This is the captain. We have received orders to activate the Prometheus protocol. You all know what this means. We knew this day might come when we volunteered. Now it has." She paused, looking at the faces of her crew. Many were young. Some were barely out of training. All of them looked afraid, but none of them looked away. "I will not give pretty speeches about glory or sacrifice. What we are about to do is simple. We are going to save our people, our families, our future. That is worth everything we have to give." She turned to her helm officer. "Take us in. Maximum speed. Straight at the target." The Defiance Times shot forward, engines pushed beyond their design limits. The massive Concorde ship saw it coming and fired its terrible beam. But the Defiance Times was small and fast, jinking and weaving through the void like a leaf in a hurricane. Other Concorde ships tried to intercept, but the architects swarmed them, buying precious seconds. Human cruisers charged in suicide runs, drawing fire away from the destroyer. Everyone understood what was happening. Everyone did their part. On the bridge of the Times Eternal Radiance Asterisk, Zeth Voran watched the small ship approaching. "What is that vessel doing?" he demanded. "Why is it charging directly at the Annihilator?" "Unknown, Grand Admiral. Perhaps a suicide attack. Primitive species sometimes resort to such tactics. Let it come, then. One small ship cannot harm the Annihilator." The Defiance Times reached the point of no return. It was inside the massive ship's shield bubble now, too close for the main weapon to target. Park smiled grimly. "Activate the Prometheus core." Deep within the destroyer, ancient technology awakened. The precursors had understood things about space-time that modern science was only beginning to grasp. They had learned to bend reality itself, to create distortions in the fabric of existence. The Prometheus core created a singularity, a tiny black hole, smaller than an atom but infinitely dense. It appeared between the Defiance Times and the massive Concorde ship, exactly where the calculations had predicted. For one heartbeat, nothing visible happened. Then gravity took over. The singularity pulled at everything around it. The Defiance Times was caught, its hull crumpling like paper. Captain Park and her crew died instantly, crushed by forces beyond imagination. But they did not die alone. The massive Concorde ship was pulled toward the singularity. Its shields were useless against gravity. Its mighty hull bent and twisted, metal screaming as it was stretched and compressed. The ship that had seemed unstoppable, that had vaporized asteroids and annihilated cruisers, was dragged toward a point of infinite density. 47 other Concorde ships were caught in the effect. They too were pulled in, crushed, compressed, destroyed. Grand Admiral Zeth Voran's flagship, the Times Eternal Radiance Asterisk, was among them. In his final moments, Zeth Voran understood what had happened. These humans, these primitive beings he had dismissed as worthless, had mastered a technology the Concorde had never imagined. They had turned the fundamental forces of the universe into a weapon. His last thought, before the singularity tore him apart, was a single word: impossible. The singularity collapsed after 7 seconds. Exactly as designed. It left behind nothing but a sphere of compressed matter, the size of a marble, containing the remains of 48 warships and 1 brave destroyer. The Battle of Threshold Gate paused. Both sides stared at the place where the singularity had been. The Concorde fleet was in shock. Their greatest weapon, their invincible Grand Admiral, nearly 50 of their finest ships, all gone in an instant. Admiral Volkov recovered first. "All ships," he ordered, his voice hard as steel. "Attack. Now. While they're confused. Give them everything we have." The human fleet surged forward. Ships that had been hiding, conserving strength, now threw themselves at the stunned enemy. Kinetic rounds hammered conquered shields. Architect drones swarmed through gaps in defensive formations. Human crews, inspired by the sacrifice of the Defiance Asterisk, fought with desperate fury. The Concorde fleet broke. It did not happen all at once. First, one ship turned and ran, then another, then a dozen, then 100. The ancient discipline that had held them together for millennia crumbled in the face of something they had never experienced: fear. Within 3 hours, the Concorde Expeditionary Fleet was in full retreat. They left behind 216 destroyed ships, countless dead crew members, and the shattered remains of their reputation. The greatest military force in the known galaxy had been defeated by a species they had called worthless. Admiral Volkov stood on the bridge of the Times, indomitable Times, and watched them flee. He felt no joy. Too many of his own people had died for joy. The Times, Defiance Times, and her crew, dozens of other ships, thousands of lives, but they had won. "Send a message to Bastion Station," he said quietly. "Tell the Chancellor, the battle is over. We are still here." On Bastion Station, Chancellor Amara Okonkwo received the news with tears in her eyes. She had watched the battle through real-time transmissions, seen the impossible victory unfold, seen the sacrifice of the Times Defiance asterisk. She had never felt more proud or more sad in her life. Around her, people were celebrating. News of the victory was spreading across human space, and everywhere, people were shouting, crying, embracing. They had faced extinction and survived. They had proven themselves against the greatest power in the galaxy. But Amara knew the truth. This was not the end. It was barely the beginning. The Concorde would not accept this defeat. They would regroup, reconsider, return. The war was not over. It would continue for years, perhaps decades. More battles would be fought. More lives would be lost. The road ahead was long and hard, but for this moment, this one precious moment, humanity had won. She walked to her office window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the retreating Concorde fleet was licking its wounds, trying to understand what had happened. Somewhere out there, the other species of the galaxy were hearing the news and wondering what it meant. A species the Council had dismissed as worthless had just defeated the mightiest fleet ever assembled. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. Amara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small crystal sphere, the same one Admiral Tanaka had carried, passed down from leader to leader. A gift from the precursors, a symbol of how far humanity had come. "We did it, Alara," she whispered to the ghost of the woman who had started it all. "We proved them wrong. We showed them what we are." The sphere pulsed softly in her hand, its patterns shifting and flowing like thoughts in crystal form. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together. They had earned their place among the stars, and no one would ever take it away. The galaxy held its breath for 3 months after the Battle of Threshold Gate. News of the Concorde's defeat spread like fire through dry grass. Every species, every world, every sentient being learned what had happened. The humans, those primitive creatures the Council had dismissed as worthless, had crushed the mightiest fleet ever assembled. Grand Admiral Zeth Voran, the legendary Velthari commander who had never known defeat, was dead. 200 warships were destroyed. The rest had fled in terror. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Concorde looked weak. On Nexus Prime, the Council met in emergency session. The 14 ancient powers gathered in the same crystalline chamber where they had once rejected humanity, and they argued about what to do next. The Kethra demanded immediate revenge. "We must destroy them, send every ship we have, burn their colonies to ash, show the galaxy that challenging the Concorde means death." The Dramath counseled caution. "We underestimated them once. Another hasty attack could fail again. We need time to study their weapons, understand their tactics." The archivists, as always, observed and recorded, offering little opinion. The Mycelians raised a possibility none wanted to consider. "Perhaps we should negotiate. They have proven their strength. Continued war benefits no one." The suggestion was met with outrage. Negotiate? With humans? The species they had called pests? It was unthinkable. But the practical reality could not be ignored. The Concorde had other concerns besides humanity. There were always threats on the borders, always internal tensions to manage, always resources to protect. Devoting everything to crushing one species in the outer rim would leave them vulnerable elsewhere. And there was the weapon to consider. The singularity technology. No one in the Concorde understood how the humans had developed it. If they could use it once, they could use it again. Any fleet sent against them might suffer the same fate as Zeth Voran's. The debate continued for weeks. Meanwhile, the humans did something unexpected. They did not attack. Chancellor Okonkwo had the power to order a counteroffensive. The Concorde was reeling, confused, afraid. A strike now could push deep into their territory. Capture systems, force concessions. Admiral Volkov and much of the military urged exactly this strategy. But Amara remembered something. She remembered Ilara Vance's final words, spoken on her deathbed decades ago. Don't become them. Whatever you do, don't become what they tried to make us. The Council had ruled through fear and force for 12,000 years. They had conquered, dominated, crushed any species that challenged them. Their empire was built on the bones of countless civilizations that had dared to resist. Humanity could follow the same path. They could use their victory to launch a war of conquest. They could become the new dominant power, replacing one empire with another. The temptation was strong. Amara rejected it. She called a special session of the Confederate Assembly. The Great Hall on Bastion Station was packed with representatives, military commanders, and citizens. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next. Everyone wanted to know if there would be more war. Amara stood at the podium and looked out at the crowd. She saw fear in some faces, anger in others, hope in a few. They were all waiting for her to tell them what to do. "We won a great victory," she began. "We proved that humanity cannot be ignored, cannot be dismissed, cannot be destroyed easily. We earned respect through blood and sacrifice. The galaxy knows our name now." She paused. "But victory is not the end. It is a beginning. We must now decide what kind of civilization we want to be, what kind of future we want to build, what legacy we want to leave for our children and grandchildren." She looked at Admiral Volkov, sitting in the front row. "Many have urged me to order a counterattack, to strike at the Concorde while they are weak, to conquer their systems, take their resources, establish humanity as the new dominant power in the galaxy." Volkov nodded slightly. He had made this argument himself, many times. "I understand the appeal of this strategy. The Concorde treated us with contempt. They threw us out, called us worthless, tried to destroy us. They deserve to suffer for what they did. Revenge would be satisfying." Amara shook her head. "But revenge is not justice. Conquest is not strength. Becoming the thing we fought against is not victory. It is the worst kind of defeat." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked angry or confused. "I did not fight this war to replace one empire with another. I did not watch my friends die so that humanity could rule the galaxy through fear. We are better than that. We must be better than that." She raised her voice. "Ilara Vance started us on this path 120 years ago. She turned rejection into motivation, humiliation into fuel. But she did not want us to become conquerors. She wanted us to become something new, something the galaxy had never seen, a species that earned its place through excellence, not through domination." She activated the display behind her, showing a document she had spent weeks preparing. "I am proposing that we send a message to the Galactic Council. Not a demand, not a threat, an invitation." The document appeared on the screen. It was short and simple. "To the Galactic Council. We do not seek vengeance. We do not seek dominion. We seek what we asked for 170 years ago. A seat at the table, not as supplicants, as equals. The Outer Rim is ours. We will defend it unto extinction, but we have no desire for your worlds. Come, let us speak as civilizations should, not as masters and servants, but as neighbors in an infinite cosmos." The hall erupted in chaos. People shouted, argued, debated. Some thought the proposal was wise and generous. Others thought it was weak and foolish. The argument continued for hours. In the end, they voted. It was close, closer than Amara had hoped. But the proposal passed. The message would be sent. 3 days later, a small diplomatic ship left Bastion Station carrying humanity's offer of peace. On Nexus Prime, the Council received the message with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. They had expected demands, threats, ultimatums. Instead, they received an invitation to negotiate. It was so unexpected that some suspected a trick. Perhaps the humans were buying time to prepare another attack. Perhaps they were secretly planning something terrible. No species the Concorde had defeated had ever responded with an offer of peace. But some on the Council saw an opportunity. The war had been expensive. More fighting would be even more expensive. If the humans were willing to negotiate, perhaps a settlement could be reached that served everyone's interests. The debate continued for months. Meanwhile, the military situation remained frozen. Neither side attacked. Both sides watched and waited. Finally, the council sent their reply. They agreed to negotiations. A meeting would be held at a neutral location, a space station in the disputed territory between human and Concord space. Representatives from both sides would attend. The Threshold Conference, as it came to be known, lasted for 6 months. Negotiators argued over every point, every word, every detail. There were moments when talks nearly collapsed, when old grievances threatened to destroy any chance of agreement. Chancellor Okonkwo led the human delegation herself. She faced representatives from all 14 council species, beings who had ruled the galaxy since before humans had invented writing. They looked down at her with the same contempt they had shown Alara Vance so long ago. But now there was something else in their eyes. Fear, respect, uncertainty. Amara used every skill she had. She was patient when patience was needed, firm when firmness was required. She made concessions on minor points to win victories on major ones. She never let anger or pride cloud her judgment. Slowly, painfully, an agreement took shape. The Treaty of Threshold recognized humanity's right to the Outer Rim. The Concord would not interfere with human territory or development. In exchange, humanity agreed not to expand into Concord space or support rebellions against their authority. Trade agreements were established. Diplomatic relations were formalized. A system was created for resolving future disputes without war. And most importantly, humanity received a seat on the Galactic Council itself, not as a junior member, not as an observer, as a full participant with equal voice and equal vote. The Concord of 14 became the new Concord of 15. The signing ceremony was held on Nexus Prime, in the same crystalline chamber where Alara Vance had been rejected 170 years earlier. Chancellor Okonkwo stood at the same central stage, surrounded by the same floating platforms, facing representatives of the same ancient species. But everything was different now. She signed the treaty with a stylus that had belonged to Alara Vance, passed down through generations of human leaders. When she finished, she looked up at the council members and spoke. 170 years ago, a woman stood where I stand now. She asked for a chance to prove humanity's worth. You refused her. You called us worthless, insignificant, doomed to fail. She let the words hang in the air. She did not argue. She did not beg. She went home and told her people to prove you wrong. And they did. We did. Not through conquest or revenge, but through determination, creativity, and refusal to accept your verdict. She gestured at the treaty. This document is not a surrender. It is not a victory. It is a recognition of reality. We exist. We are strong. We are here to stay. You can either work with us or against us, but you cannot ignore us anymore. She looked directly at the Velthari representative, the successor to the being who had laughed at Alara Vance. You called us pests. You said we should be grateful you didn't manage us like vermin. Today, we sign a treaty as equals. I hope you understand what that means. It means your judgment was wrong. It means your arrogance blinded you. It means the galaxy is bigger and more complex than you ever imagined. The Velthari said nothing. There was nothing to say. When the ceremony ended, Amara returned to human space as a hero. Celebrations erupted across the Confederation. People who had lived their entire lives under the shadow of Concord contempt finally felt free. They had been recognized. They had been accepted. They belonged. But Amara knew the work was not done. Treaties were only as good as the will to maintain them. The Concord had agreed to peace because they had to, not because they wanted to. There would be challenges ahead, tensions, conflicts. The old species would test humanity's resolve, probe for weaknesses, look for opportunities to reassert their dominance. And some humans would want to test the Concord as well. Volkov and his faction still believed in strength, in expansion, in showing the galaxy that humanity was the rising power. They would push for more aggressive policies, greater military spending, bolder actions on the galactic stage. Amara would have to balance all of these forces, keep the peace, guide humanity through its new role. It would not be easy. 1 year after the Treaty of Threshold, a monument was unveiled on Bastion Station. It stood in the central plaza, visible from anywhere on the habitat, a statue of Alara Vance, carved from asteroid stone, her hand outstretched in offering. The inscription at the base read, "They cast us aside. We built an empire. Then we offered them our hand. This is what it means to be human. Amara attended the dedication ceremony. So did Admiral Volkov, and representatives from every major human world. Thousands of people gathered to witness the moment. When the covering fell away and the statue was revealed, the crowd fell silent. Alara Vance looked down at them with the same determined expression she had worn in life. Her outstretched hands seemed to reach across time, connecting the past to the present. Amara spoke briefly. Alara Vance never saw what we became. She died wondering if humanity would succeed or fail. But everything we have, everything we are, started with her. With her refusal to accept defeat. With her vision of what we could become. We owe her more than we can ever repay. She looked up at the statue. But I think the best way to honor her memory is not through statues or ceremonies. It is through our choices. Every day, every moment, we decide what kind of species we will be. Do we choose fear or courage, revenge or mercy, domination or cooperation? Those choices define us more than any military victory or diplomatic treaty. She turned to face the crowd. We have power now. Real power. The kind of power the Concord has held for thousands of years. What we do with that power will determine our legacy. Will we be remembered as conquerors who replaced one empire with another? Or will we be remembered as something new? Something better? A species that earned its place through excellence and then used its strength to lift others up? She smiled. I know what Alara would have chosen, and I know what we should choose. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. Because we are better than our pain. Because mercy is not weakness. Because true strength is measured not by what you take, but by what you give. After the ceremony, Amara found herself alone with Admiral Volkov. They stood at the observation window, looking out at the stars. The same stars humanity had once been forbidden to reach. You know this isn't over, Volkov said quietly. The Concord will test us. They'll scheme, manipulate, try to tear us apart from within. They haven't accepted us. They're just biding their time. Amara nodded. I know, and some of our own people will cause problems. There are factions who want war, who think we should have crushed the Concord when we had the chance. They won't be satisfied with treaties and diplomacy. I know that too. Volkov turned to look at her. And we'll be ready? Amara met his gaze. For a moment, Volkov saw something in her eyes that reminded him of the stories about Alara Vance. The same cold fire, the same absolute determination. Dmitri, she said softly. We've always been ready. That's what they never understood about us. Humanity doesn't wait to be ready. We become ready. We adapt. We overcome. We endure. She turned back to the window, to the infinite expanse of stars. They thought our youth was a weakness. They were wrong. Youth means we haven't learned to accept limits yet. We haven't learned what's supposed to be impossible. We dream bigger, reach farther, try harder than species who have been around for millions of years. They thought our aggression was a flaw. They were wrong about that too. Aggression, properly directed, becomes determination. It becomes the refusal to quit. It becomes the will to fight for what matters. They thought our fragility made us inferior. But fragility teaches you to value every moment, to make every day count, to build things that will last beyond your own short life. She smiled again, but this time there was warmth in it. Everything they hated about us, everything they used to justify their contempt, those are our greatest strengths. We just needed the chance to prove it. Now we have. Volkov was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I never thought about it that way. I always just wanted to fight, to prove we were strong. I never considered that winning could mean something more than defeating our enemies. It does, Amara said. It means becoming the best version of ourselves. Not the version that conquers and dominates, but the version that creates and inspires. That's the victory Alara wanted. That's the victory that will last. Outside the window, ships moved through the void. Human ships, carrying goods and passengers to every corner of the outer rim. Trading vessels heading for Concord space, opening new markets, new relationships. Exploration ships pushing into the unknown, searching for more precursor secrets, more wonders waiting to be discovered. Humanity had seized the outer rim. They had proven the Council wrong. They had earned their place among the stars. But the journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, struggles, setbacks. The galaxy was vast and complicated, full of dangers and opportunities. Nothing was certain, yet looking out at those stars, Amara felt something she had not felt in years. Hope, not because the future was guaranteed to be good, not because all problems were solved, but because humanity had shown what it could do when pushed to the edge. They had turned rejection into triumph, contempt into respect, nothing into something magnificent. Whatever came next, they would face it together. They would adapt, overcome, endure. They would continue to prove that the Council's judgment had been the greatest mistake in galactic history, because that was what it meant to be human, not to be